While we wait for our first speaker, first partner to connect, we are going to start with Elena Serrano's presentation, and I give the floor to her now.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. So thank you very much for attending this conference. I will continue now with the bodies and the appetites, and I will descend to more moody waters, I would say, or mundane waters, to the actual physiology of love. How was the rise of that sentiment explained at the 18th century? So, dealing with the origins of love required to deal with the thorny body, mind, or soul problem, namely, how matter can produce feelings and thoughts. The post-Cartesian and post-Lockean context was awash with debates on how to conceive such relationship between external stimuli and the thoughts and feelings that these could provoke. In particular, passions were thought to be the result of the intimate workings of organs, animal spirits, nerves, and soul. Sometimes all, sometimes only a few of them. But the way all these elements relate to each other and the physical nature of them were object of much debate. No wonder, because the way one conceives how bodies work and how feelings and sentiments are produced have deep consequences. Not only in medical matters, of course, but also they outwardly shape how one behaves and how one relates to others. Physiological models have also metaphysical and political consequences. They could be brandished for supporting or debunking free will, for instance, or for supporting racial and sexual differences. So today I would like to discuss how these interplays between the soul and the flesh were conceived through the ideas of the Spanish natural philosopher Benito Jerónimo Feijó, that it is already famous in this audience because Monica and Kalin has also talked about him. So the interest of Feijó is not only that he was immensely popular, as we already know, but the interest is also because Feijóo's ideas allow us to look to the physiology of love from a different perspective than medical books, religious sermons, or erotic novels, to quote but a few. It may be called a perspective that is philosophical and scientific, erudite, but popular at the same time. So in the short essays that he gathered in his Teatro Universal and the Cartas Eruditas y Curiosas, but very especially in the ones that I have listed there, like the New Art of Physiognomy or the Origins of Love and the Remedies of Love, Feijó reflected on whether it was possible to know the inner self of the other just at first sight, or why lovers are moved by the mere thinking of the other, and why it is so difficult to leave behind an unfortunate love. To be sure, his model accommodated the requirements of Catholicism, such as free will and the immortality of the souls. But he also believed in the equal functioning of male and female bodies in respect to the intellectual operations, undermining any supposed difference between them when it came to falling in love. So in this brief talk, I will first show Feijóo's ideas about how love originated, and then how he devised a cure for those who want to get rid of this passion, which pose, in my view, fascinating questions on how to overcome the power of imagination. So, so then, to begin with, Feijó distinguished three kinds of love. The pure appetite, the one that, for example, the one that we feel when we smell a delicious fruit or we look at, think of sugar. And according to Feijó, these objects excited love, appetite, better said, because the soul already had experienced them and can evoke the representation of the pleasure. Then we have the intellectual love, where only the rational part of the soul is excited. This is the love that one feels for God, for instance. And finally, Foucault talk about the pathetic love, or the passion of love. This is the one that he explained for his readers in this discourse on the origins of love. And to illustrate the difference between these kinds of love, and which ultimately reflects his views about masculinity and femininity, it could serve as an example how Foucault answered a classical question posed by Bacon about whether statements could be of amorous nature, genios amatorios. Foucault hardly disagrees with the common opinion that the amorous types were childish and effeminate spirits. On the contrary, for Foucault, the people of amorous nature have often the good dispositions that the statesmen need. And these are sweet, benign, kind, obliging, human, liberal, deferential, and caring. In tyrannical leaders, such as Neron or Caligula, one finds only low appetite, not true love. So now, returning to the question of the origins of the passionate lover, Foucault relied in a mechanical physiology in which nerves connected imagination with the brain, the heart, and the genitals. It was the mechanical interactions between all these elements that produced the amorous feeling. His model would be perhaps clear if we analyze what, according to Foucault, might be happening in the bodies of these two youngest in this picture for a contemporary painter who was interested in representing the sentiments of his sitter through eyes and gestures. So, love will begin with the senses. For example, the woman's eyes impress on the man's retinas, or perhaps her delicate smell also impress his olfactory sense, or perhaps her voice, her sweet voice, as we have here before. Each of these sensations impress the man's terminal nerves. The nervous agitations reach a particular part of the brain, the sensorio común. I see. Yeah, it has been, so it should be like arrows between them, but I change it to PowerPoint and yeah. But you can follow, no? It's beginning here and we go there. So these impressions were transmitted to the soul. It is in the soul where the perception occurs, according to Foucault. It is the soul that sees, not the eyes. As he said, then the imagination, a part of the soul, agitates the brain, which in response sends via the spinal nerves other mechanical movements to the heart, and sometimes, if love has a concupiscent part, to the genitals and the breast. But these fibers of the brain could also be moved by the imagination. It was not necessary to have a physical stimulus. Only the mere thinking of the lover could distort his nerves. Most contemporaneous physiological models, for instance, the one of the famous British doctor Thomas Willis, the depiction of this brain and these nerves came from one of his books. Thomas Willis thought of the nerves as hollow tubes through which animal spirits, that is extremely subtle fluid, which easily distort and travel quickly. Sensations and desires were provoked because animal spirits agglomerate in a determinate organ or flee away from others. But for Foucault, the nerves were solid. They were that similar like chords of string instruments, which exercise their influence through vibrations. His model is not an hydraulic model as the one of Willis, but he was an undulating model. The nerves, according to Foucault, were capable of many movements. They could separate, corrugate, stretch, compress, loosen, or become more flexible or more rigid, depending on the stimulus. Foucault speculated, perhaps with irony, that the movement that makes us feel love might be undulating, while other feelings, for instance fear, may be provoked by spasmodic movements. He nevertheless kept the viscera as the locus of feelings. Just as hunger is felt in the stomach, Feijóo tells his reader that the organ that feels the love is the heart. Feijóo was explicit about how the flames of love influence the heart. And he said, love disturbs, agitates, compresses, delays, infuriates, sadness, rejoices, and encourages the heart according to the different states on which lover is. And Feijóo also speculated on the influence of chemicals. If the man of the picture that we have already, had recently eaten or drunk, the salts dissolved in his blood would affect his heart through occult pores, predisposing him to salacious attraction. So, for Feijóo, then, it was ultimately the individual microdispositions of fibers and pores, identical between the sexes and indistinguishable even with the microscope, that made two people fall in love. This close contact between soul and body via the nerves effectively and continuously provoke subtle and delicate movements in the flesh. For instance, blushing with shame or trembling with excitement. And this was especially true in the cases of eyes. All the mutations of the soul could be reflected, according to Feijóo, in the sparkling eyes, or the wandering eyes, or in the restless eyes. So now, arriving to the last part of the talk is how can one stop the incessant movements, these incessant amorous waves that shakes the heart? Or in other words, how a cure for unwanted love could be devised in this physiological context? Of course, love sickness has been recognized as an ailment from a long time ago, and the remedies were based in different conceptions of bodies. For example, in the humoral body, in which sickness was thought as imbalance of humor, traditional methods include bleeding, forging, and sweating. Feijóo advised to his readers to forget all of these methods, as well as the popular advice of Ovidio to flee the city where the lover lives, or to think deeply in all his flaws, or to busy oneself with something else, or to redundantly quench the sexual desire. For Feijóo, the only true remedy when the amorous passion was firmly rooted in the heart is to counteract with another terrible violent agitation. For doing so, he recommends to think on something dreadful, just at the same time as one advocates the image of the sweet herb. So Feijóo compassionately admitted that the treatment was difficult, and he specified which kind of images were more effective to heal the in-love. One needs to choose the mental image carefully. It had to suit one's particular fears, and better if it was something horrible that one had watched himself, or even better if one had experimented himself. Then one had to evoke the dreadful feeling at the same time that he recalls the lover images. Even more efficient was to recall several horrible images one after the other. The treatment needed patience, as one had to habituate the imagination to swiftly fly from the image of the lover to the dreadful image. So it was not, as Feijóo noted, that the reason alone could fight the passion, but that reason could not even intervene making certain violence to the subject. So you have like to fool the imagination, because other rational methods will at the end will be too violent for the subject. No? So leaving apart the possible irony of Feijóo's, which it will never be dismissed, as we know, the important thing in my view is that he devised a method that recognizes the arduous work of the rational arguments in the Beckel case, or its futility in the passionate body. The optimum way to counteract the power of the imagination was with its own mechanical weapons. So recapitulating some conclusions that might be useful when thinking about 18th century love bodies and souls are this one that I have put here. For Feijóo, one falls in love when the other makes literally the heart tremble. The common agitation of two sensible hearts make much. A huge number of individual variables, material and spiritual, permanent and temporary, are involved. The fibers of the nerve, the heart and the brain, the images created by the imagination, the memories that interfere with these images. Second is that as women and men share the same organic nature in his model, masculinity and femininity cannot be defined by a special sensibility towards love. There are not amatory patterns according to temperament or sexes. The melancholic can be as passionate as the sanguine, the maiden as ardent as the young man. Of course, the model also opened the door to different conceptions of bodies, because if you say, well, the fibers of the woman are more thin or they can vibrate differently, but this will happen later. Now, according to Feijóo, there is no reason for this difference. Against the prejudices of the affectionate man, Feijóo defended that male leaders can be also tender lovers and loving characters. And this doesn't mean lack of manliness. And the last one is that there are ways of governing the feeling of love without involving reason and without changing the scenery or making too much fussle or noise. It is enough to relink the images of love with terrible images in a war to treat the imagination. Thank you very much.